welcome to Infinite Wisdom. Oh, it's so nice to have you here, John. And it's very understanding. We don't usually have these technical glitches.
It's very special days. Lots going on.
I have to tell you, just because it might happen tonight, but in my last two Zoom calls, I have a little rogue thumbs up that appears on the bottom of my screen. And it goes like this, and the next thing you know, fireworks are going off on my screen.
So many reasons to believe.
I'm thinking they're giving me a thumbs up for what I'm doing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't know. I think it might be a glitch.
Work-life balance. Always one down.
If you happen to see floating thumbs and fireworks, I have nothing to do with it. Anyway, welcome, John. It is a pleasure to have you here. And I was so happy to meet you this summer through our mutual friend, Martha, and be a third leg of a stool in August for her event, for you, to the two of your event. And of course, I knew right away that I wanted to talk to you myself. So we here at Infinite Wisdom are always fascinated to hear people's journeys. And I think that's really valuable because everybody's on one. And sometimes there are some, oh, that happened to me, or, oh, that hasn't happened to me. Gee, I wonder what that would be. You know, it brings the humanity to these spiritual journeys, which can be rather other humanly. So let's put it that way. So will you please take us back to the very, very beginning? Where did you grow up? And tell us about your family of origin and all of that stuff.
Okay, perfect. So I was born on a little island on the very east coast of Canada. It's an island off, Newfoundland is an island province, but this is a little island off the coast of Newfoundland. So I was literally born in the Atlantic Ocean. And I grew up there for just a year. My parents had been there their whole life, but my dad was a marine engineer. And so they moved to Nova Scotia for his work when I was a baby. And so I have a family of 7 kids. So I'm the 6th of 7, and we all packed up and moved to Nova Scotia to Cape Breton. And that's where I grew up. And then eventually went off to university.
Okay, wait a minute. So you're on this little tiny island. Was this an island that your family had been on for decades, generations? That would be the reason you were there, right?
Yeah, for sure. So there was part of the big Irish immigration to Canada, during the potato famine. And so there had been generations of Irish folks who had kind of peppered the whole island coastline. Most of them were fishermen. So they did cod fishing and other fishing adventures. And so my whole 7 generations, I think, my little brother is really into genealogy. So he mapped out the whole family tree, and there were 7 or 8 generations before my parents.
Wow.
Yeah, and they all lived within an island of each other, basically.
So my brother did a sailing trip around. Was it Nova Scotia? No, it was Newfoundland.
Okay. Yeah, Newfoundland's an island, so that would make sense.
Right. And he visited different islands on this little sailboat that they went on. And he said the culture from island to island is extremely different. Like he went on to some French islands that you might as well have been across the ocean in France. I mean, it was just all of
Saint-Pierre and Miquelon, probably.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if these islands that you were born on, at least, had this strong Irish flavor, like you really feel like you could have been off the coast of Ireland.
Pretty much. Like the culture was really retained because there was no big external influence on the people. They came from Ireland. They were seafaring people, so they kind of, like a hand in a glove, they kind of fit right into the environment, and but maintained a lot of the Irish ways. and even to a degree, the accents, the brogue, of Irish language, and they have all kinds of sayings that nobody would understand at all today. But they were really metaphoric language, so they would speak always in metaphors and symbols and things like that.
And did they bring the fairy folk with them?
Well, there was rumor. I haven't seen any myself. Now, haven't been back a lot because I moved when I was just a little boy, and so I grew up mostly in Cape Breton. And but we used to go back every summer, so I had a lot of cousins and family still there, and we would travel back all the time. So I have really fond memories of there, not so much being born there, but later going back to visit. And but a really simple, down to earth life, very humble people, hardworking people, but an incredible morality and integrity. Like it was a beautiful foundation, I think, for life in so many ways, because there was this simple wisdom in everything they did. And so as we moved into the more civilized world, as we call
The big city.
it. It was nice to have. I would often say to my friends, I need to go home just to reset. And that's how I always felt growing up in my life when things ever got too busy, too crazy, too egoic. I would always say, I just need to go home for a reset. And so it's really been an anchor in my life in many, many ways.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's a very, I mean, they were sea people, but it's a very earthy foundation.
Yeah.
Isn't it? I mean, you didn't have probably on those islands. I mean, when I was a kid, I went to Maine to stay with a lobster faring family, lobsterman family, whatever. And there was an outhouse and no electricity.
Yeah.
And, I'm imagining it was the same, similar to at least to where you grew up.
So where I grew up, by the time I was a little boy, we were in Cape Breton, so we were in a town by that point. But on the island, it was very much that way. They started to have, those kinds of facilities on the island before my parents left, but not long before they left. So they, like my older brothers and sisters, they all grew up in that setting. They had to go to the outhouse and to the well and all that kind of stuff.
Well,
Yeah.
that's where I learned to do well.
Yeah.
Well, this is fascinating. So when you were in Cape Breton, then as you were growing up, did you have any kind of inclination about otherworldly things?
Mm-hmm. It's interesting. Growing up, the most vivid memory of growing up was my sensitivity. I was always very aware of what was happening in the environment around me, kind of a very strong intuition, although I didn't have the language to say that at the time. But I would always know when people were hurting, when they needed help, when they were having an issue, when they were being dishonest. Like there was just everything was quite transparent, and it caused a little bit of trouble because you always want to call it out as a kid. You're when the mouths are bathed. So people had to condition you not to always say the truth. But that was kind of the strongest attribute I think that I remember as a kid that carried over into the future and the kinds of things I'm interested in and do today. And but I also had this awareness of kind of just wanting to grow up. I remember being a little boy thinking, this is just so transient. I just have to go through this. And but it's not the reason I'm here. Like I always knew that it was just a passing phase. So I never really felt like, some children remember their child, or some adults remember their childhood and they think they just love being a child. When I was a kid, I thought I just can't kind of wait to grow up and get on with it. Like I know for a reason, and I just really want to go through this phase kind of thing to start my life and the purpose I'm here. So there was always this awareness and pressure that more was coming, or there were other things in the future that were important. And then later in life, I actually had a memory of being a 7-year-old boy. And I was with my friend, and we were together with her mother, and we were looking at this book that was called The Encyclopedia of the Future. And so it was great for kids. And my friend's mom, she said, John, what do you think the future will be like? And what an incredible question to ask a kid who's like open-minded, right? And so, but something overcame me, Hope. I remember standing there and I felt this energy come down on my body, like I had this overlay. And I stood up like I was the emperor. And I said, there are two possible futures for the planet. And I said, I won't really know until about 1998 if we've chosen the good one. So I'll get back to you on that.
Oh my goodness. I
And of
think you
course,
stunned her.
and I had completely forgotten all about that until years later when I started to go through other awakening type experiences and things. And I remembered having that awareness as a child. I remember thinking, I think we all knew this, like not consciously perhaps, but in a deeply subconscious way. We knew when we were born, the earth was on kind of two possible trajectories. And until we got to the choice point, it wasn't clear where we were going. And then things eventually, of course, clarified and we moved on to the path that we're on, which doesn't always feel like it is. What's to
Yes,
live
we're
in
going to get there. We're going to get there. But first, we have to finish warming up.
We're definitely on our way, but we're going through some.
This is why I ask the probing questions about the childhood, because I feel like the breadcrumbs were there somewhere. And really, for all of us, we have unexplainable memories and situations that happened, and I find it useful to look back so that I can, make the arc of the story of the life. So I love the seeds that are planted in the early days. So thank you for sharing that with us. That's great.
Yeah.
This I can't imagine that poor mother. She was like, oh, not expecting that answer at all.
Actually, there's one other kind of magical
Yes.
story. I'll just take a minute and share because it's
That's
so
fine.
beautiful. I remember we went back with my brother and his 4 young children and his wife and my partner, and my whole family actually was there. And we went out on a whale watching cruise. And we were on the southern side of Newfoundland, so a bit, just kind of around the corner from where we were born originally. But when I went back, I was kind of surprised because I thought I didn't know there were whales this common in Newfoundland to the point where they're having whale tours and things like that. Anyway, we went out, and while we were on the boat, this whale swam under the boat. Like I could see it, I knew it was a female. She was coming towards us, and she got to the boat and she paused. And under the boat, she turned sideways and looked at all of us lined up on the railing of the boat. And I remember looking in her eyes. I'll never forget the feeling. It was incredible. The love and the wisdom that was radiating from this creature was amazing. And I had a reading a short time after that. And this lady said, "Oh, you re-met your whale." And I said, "Oh," I said, "what do you mean?" And she said, "You had another encounter with your whale." She said, "That whale was there the day you were born."
Oh,
And I almost lost my mind. I was weak from shock. And I realized so incredibly true. And so she said, it's very much connected to purpose, to who you are, all these kinds of things. So many people have a deep connection to the whales and the dolphins. But she said, it was a very magical moment for you. And I said, it really was. And I could remember the intensity of the love feeling I had seeing the whale. And you could feel pulsing out of her this incredible energy, and it was surrounding the boat. It was surrounding the boat. Really, really amazing. So,
so you were an adult at that time.
By this point, yeah, this was probably 25 years ago or so. With it, we had the.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah.
How incredible! That is so beautiful. And when we think about how the whales are in touch with God knows everything, and probably connected to lots of individuals on the planet, and wow, that's really something. I love that. All right, take us forward. what I'm interested because in high school is when we start to figure out what we're attracted to, what kind of lessons and so on and so forth. So what grabbed your attention in high school?
In high school. Actually, before high school, when I was in elementary school, I remember registering for school. And my mom had brought me to the school where I'd be registering, and we went into the classroom. And I remember a really strange incident. I remembered it years later. And we sat in wooden desks, and there was a little drawer in the desk. And I said to Mom, "What is that drawer for?" And she said, "Oh, it's for, you put your books and you put all your belongings and those types of things." And she said, and then I said to her, "So that you just do what everybody else does?" And she said, "Yeah, that's right. You just kind of follow the beat of the room. You just kind of do what everybody does and you'll know what to do." And I thought, okay, I'll do that. And years later, I remembered that moment. And I remember it as the moment when I kind of surrendered to be willing to be like everybody else.
For self-preservation.
For self-preservation. It was like to get through school and all that kind of stuff. And so that kind of I share that now just because it kind of carried with me through the whole school process. I was always I enjoyed school very much. I loved learning. I, would take on any kind of an academic challenge and those types of things. I really enjoyed it. And then, but again, I just kind of felt like I'm just biding my time. I kind of have to go through this and eventually I'll grow up. By the time I got into high school, I kind of knew I was interested in medicine. And that I really foresaw that as the path that I would take if I could manage to do that, if I could be successful at doing that. And really kind of settled into that pathway. And then so from there, I went off to university to study science and medicine, and that became my path from that point forward. But high school was I enjoyed it. I had nice friendships. I have friends that I still have to this day. In fact, I'm having dinner tomorrow night with a friend from high school that I haven't seen in quite a time. And so it was a really nice social time. Nice bonds were formed, but very undisputed otherwise. There's really nothing.
But you figured out the thing you were interested in. That's
Totally.
usually where we figure that things out.
Yeah.
So you go through medicine, and what did you choose as your subject, as your specialty?
So interesting. I went through medical school and I was kind of just finishing medical school. And it was I graduated from medicine in 1989. So between the period of 1987, which is an auspicious year from Jane's spiritual perspective, through the end of my last year or two in medicine, I went through this period where I kind of thought, I think I've made a mistake. Like, I think I've gone through all of this schooling and, all that it takes, of course, to do that. I was just about to graduate and become a family practitioner. But I thought something is really missing. Like I'm not quite sure what it is. And then all around that time, I began to have what I would recognize today as a Kundalini awakening process. I started having these strange energy experiences. And so I would go to bed and, my body would start to vibrate and I'd pop out of my body and have these conscious out of body experiences and feeling kind of less than happy, less than, fully satisfied with medicine and going through these experiences. I started to think for a little while something was wrong with me. I kind of thought,
I'm sure.
Like, what's going down here? And so I thought, there must be something wrong. And then, but I kept hearing this voice in my head, don't worry, don't worry, don't worry. It's okay. And so one thing led to another. And I woke up one morning and had this unrelenting intuition. And it just said, John, go to this bookstore, go to this bookstore. And I could hear it as an audible voice, go to this bookstore.
Let me just pause you there.
Yeah.
Had you heard voices in your head before?
It's kind of funny. It's not a voice like someone's talking to you. It's kind of like a sound you hear. And
I
you're
understand.
not sure it's a voice. It registers as a voice and it felt like guidance. And I just
But had you had that before?
Once or twice, yeah, around
And,
like kind of important
and
decisions.
on the Kundalini piece,
Yeah.
did you have any framework to put that in, any context whatsoever?
None at
These-
all.
It must have been a little scary.
It was very frightening. I mean, I kept having these moments of thinking, this is really interesting. And then thinking, what the hell is wrong? Keeping this, like, waxing and waning between these two polarities. And then I kind of thought, I didn't know where to turn. Like, I kind of thought, I've been through most of medicine, and there's certainly nothing I encountered there that would ever begin to explain what I'm living. And it didn't fit the profile of a medical condition or a disease or anything. And yet it was very real. And so I kind of thought, I don't really know what to do with this. But it was the bookstore became really important, because when I had this intuition, I kind of got up and thought, okay, I'm just going to go. So I got in my car, I began to drive, and I found myself there. And I knew the store existed, but I had never been. It was a holistic store, with what was available back in the day, not nearly as much as today, but it was like an old mansion of a house, and every room had a different kind of category of books, like yoga and Eastern medicine and that kind of stuff. And so I walked in and I thought, well, it's very interesting, but I'll never find in here what I'm looking for. Like, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing here. And all of a sudden there was a book on the bookshelf that, as my eyes panned, it magnified. Like today, when you run your mouse over a computer icon, it'll get bigger. The book got bigger on the shelf, and I'm looking, thinking, what am I seeing? And I went over and took the book off the shelf, and it said The Spontaneous Awakening of Kundalini by Gopi Krishna. That was the name of the book. And so I was blown away, and I started to read that cover, and I thought, this is kind of what I'm living. Not exactly, but there were so many similarities between what I was experiencing and the kind of information that he was sharing in the book. And so I realized that at that moment in time, it was totally an orchestrated, synchronous moment, like really under the wing of spirit, being guided to something. And so I learned a lot from that experience. It was kind of a foundational experience for me, Hope, because I realized I have an intuition that's really apt. Synchronicities occur when you listen to it that you could never plan for or orchestrate or organize in any way. And it'll bring you what you don't even know you need. And so, like, all of that was just consolidated in one punch. It was like, okay, so on top of course, all the information in the book and everything else that came from it. But it taught me to really begin trusting that inner awareness and to really follow that. And so it became a compass for me, at a very early age. And I kind of let it guide me into decisions I made, that kind of thing. But one thing led to another. It drew me into the world of energy healing, consciousness-based medicine, all kinds of what we would view as a little more woo stuff, crystals, vibrational healing, all these kinds of things, energy healing. And then I met a gentleman around that time who was
Let me get the timing here. So did you graduate
I did.
from
I
medical
finished
school?
medicine.
Okay, so you finished that.
I went off to Montreal at that point to do my internship at the Montreal General Hospital. So I was there for 2 years.
Is that where you found this book?
So the book was in just before I left.
Okay.
And then in Montreal, I began having another series of experiences that were more about energy healing and energy medicine and these types of things. And so I began seeking it out at that point. Like, I'd had enough of an encounter with the book, with the information, that I thought there's so much more here I need to know. And so by the time I settled in Montreal, I was looking for answers and starting to seek out people, seek out information and experiences that would help me go forward.
So you were doing your residency in Montreal, practicing family doctoring, whatever.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you're developing this whole energy work.
Correct.
Did you feel a little like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Or
Oh, quite often.
I mean, When
I never really quite knew how to reconcile them. Like I during my time, like when I first settled in Montreal, I began having, again, just kind of one after another, a series of interesting experiences. One was very profound. I was, just kind of settled there. And my father back in Nova Scotia got ill. And I had a premonition that he was going to cross over on a very specific date. And I knew that I wanted to go home. But I was kind of trapped in my medical world and feeling the responsibility of all that. And I went to work one morning after having this kind of dream. It was like an awakening dream where I kind of had this premonition of the day he would pass. And it was about a week from that date that this would happen. And I was on call that evening, and overnight I had to admit 3 patients who all had the same diagnosis as my dad. And so when I started to present the patients the next morning in rounds, I completely collapsed. I was sobbing, like just, I couldn't even contain myself. And so the chief doctor at the time, she was a sweetheart. She just came up and she said, John, she said, what are you doing here? And I said, well, what do you mean? And she said, you need to go home. Like you just need to go home. I'd taken a moment to kind of explain to her what the situation was. And she said, you just pack your bag. She said, off you go. She said, off to see your family. We'll take care of everything here. You don't worry about it. And she sent me on my way. And it was around that time because of all these energy things that I was living, I always kind of had a spiritual belief system, not terribly. I was raised in a family that was Catholic. So there was sort of an overlay of religion, but not in a strong way for me. And so but I had a spirituality. Like I just always believed in more to life. I knew there was some kind of a creative force. I knew that there was a rhyme and a reason to things that didn't seem to make sense in the physical world and so on. But at this point in time, I really began asking big questions like, what happens when we die? Like, why are we here? All that kind of stuff. And so when I went home for this experience, my mom was beside herself. Her and dad, dad was just preparing to retire. And they were going to, build a retirement house together. And, all the kids had grown up and everybody was on their way and they were going to settle into the next phase of their life when this happened. And so she was devastated, of course. And she became really obsessed with this idea that it had to rain on the Monday, which was the day of my father's funeral. And my mom was kind of psychic in lots of ways, and she had lots of interesting, spiritual experiences in her life. But she was not really terribly superstitious or anything like that. But she just was obsessed. And I thought it's just a reaction. It's like a grief reaction, and she's processing. Just be patient and everything will, organize itself with time. But she was so obsessed with it needing to rain on this day that it's all the rest of the kids began talking about. Like we became obsessed with it, thinking she's going to be devastated if it doesn't rain. And it was in the month of July, and the day arrives for the funeral. All I'm thinking about at this point is the absence of rain. Like I just thought my mom's going to be crushed. And so we had the funeral. We went to the cemetery. The priest said his prayer, and he said the amen at the end of the prayer. And as he bowed his head, the sky was blue, and there was one big puffy white cloud that formed during the internment at the cemetery over the area where we were. And as he said his amen, 3 massive rainballs came out of the sky and landed on my father's casket.
Oh my goodness.
And it was like a baptism, like I splattered, and everybody got splashed with these raindrops. And I was like looking in shock at what just happened. And I was watching my mom at the other end. She was at the end of the casket. And she took this breath, and it was like a breath that never finished. It was like in 100 times. And then all of a sudden she stopped and she exhaled. And I literally saw Hope, peace descend on her.
Oh,
And I thought, oh my God, what
Wow.
just happened here? And so I was thinking, as I, process this, we all kids are like looking at each other. We didn't know what to say or what to do, what to make of it. And we're standing around. And to be honest, we never spoke of it for about 6 months. Like we were in such shock from what happened. But I realized as I processed this and reflected on it, that it was exactly the medicine for my mother. Like it is exactly what she needed to be able to live her widowhood in peace. And I was so grateful and so, you know, just moved and, completely shocked and moved. And I thought, whatever did that, whether it was my dad, whether it was the God, whether it was some angelic force, whatever was going on there, there's something pretty incredible in the world. And so it was a real moment for me where any vestige of doubt or uncertainty or anything like that was shattered in one fell swoop. And so from that day forward, I always believed in the creator. I always believed in life after our lives on the earth, those types of things. And it just kind of set me on my spiritual path. Like it was a really foundational experience for me. And so as I lived through that and started doing exploring, I started having all kinds of experiences, learning from people, meeting people who had interesting knowledge and experiences, learned about energy healing, had profound experiences in exploring that myself, and the types of things I got to live by doing that. And so one thing just kind of led to another, and I realized that this was really what I was supposed to awaken and uncover. And going back to the bookstore, there were two books. There was a second book that I was shown that day. The first book kind of magnified, like I was saying. The second book started to glow like it had light in it. And I thought, this is just all too much. People are going to think I've lost my mind here. But I had them both in my hand, and I checked out of the bookstore as quickly as I could to get out of here before I start seeing ghosts or something. And so the second book was a book by Lee Carroll, who channels an entity called Cryon. And it was his very first book. He had just kind of stepped onto the public stage speaking and things. And it was called The End Times. And it was an interesting book. The work has evolved a lot since that first book, but this first book was about a spiritual awakening and, the importance of this phase of humanity. And I started remembering all the things I knew as a little boy. And I realized, oh, we're at that choice point time. We're at this place where the earth has to decide now whether we're going to go forward and accelerate our evolution or not. And so all of that kind of started to seep back into my awareness and into my consciousness. And one thing led to another. And then I realized that the whole ascension journey has begun. And that's where we are.
What year was that?
That was by the time this all consolidated in my thinking, it was probably 92 or 93, I would say, in that time frame.
So you still had a few years before the big choice point, 1998.
Yeah, well, it was a weird thing because I kind of thought 1987, people speak of the harmonic convergence and how that was really the time of the choice.
Yeah.
And that resonates with me. Like, I really think that was when, things were decided that, and the way I often explain this is we think about it as like a measurement point, was humanity conscious enough to be able to graduate into a higher dimensional consciousness, or however people like to think about it. But the way I like to really think about it is, was there enough love present in humanity to nurture it through the process of what it was about to unfold?
Yes.
And so humanity had to be evolved to a point of a love of a certain strength, like more than 51% love.
Yes. Yes.
So that it could sustain us through what it would take to walk through the next period of humanity's future.
Yes.
And that was just the beginning. It was just kind of like the decision point. And, Cryon in his work, Lee talks about, or Cryon speaks about the restructuring of the electromagnetic grid, how the whole energetic structure of the planet then had to be reprogrammed or reestablished to be, and the reason that had to take place is the future we're moving into is of a much different vibration, and like a cosmic vibration. It carries much more energy, much more light. And in order for the earth to be a home to that, to be able to receive that energy and anchor that energy and sustain that energy for humanity, she had to undergo her own energetic metamorphosis. And so the grid is kind of like the foundation, like the basement on a house. And so the grid has to be solidified, strengthened, recalibrated, prepared for what would eventually happen in 2012. And so, of course, we speak of 2012 now as, the famous prophecies of the end times and all this kind of stuff. But for those who probe into it, we realize it's the end of a cycle, not the end of time. And so humanity is going through a new cycle. But the profundity of this cycle, in my understanding, is that if we hadn't really arrived at a positive outcome at the harmonic convergence, the planet would have had to go through another cataclysmic fall. But because we had achieved enough love, it sounds strange to say that, but that's how I see it, then the decision was made to begin the movement into an ascended civilization. And then the earth had to be prepared for that eventuality. It couldn't just happen. Like the earth had to be prepared, understanding the big cosmic array of things and how cycles and planets move and all these kinds of things. And that we're going to begin to receive these cosmic fluxes of energy and light. And so it would all really start happening in a bigger way post 2012, 2013. And that knowledge, the memory of that started to awaken in me over that period of time. And then I could see how energetic consciousness-based healing, energy healing, the ascension, all these things began interweaving. And meanwhile, here I am in my medical job, just learning through all of this. And it was strange because I kind of lived two parallel realities in one way. Not exactly, but I eventually specialized in diagnostic imaging, which is the interpretation of CT and MRI and all this kind of stuff. And really what that is energetic reading. Like you're looking at energy pictures that are made from the body and making diagnoses about illnesses or changes in illnesses through those energetic pictures. So in a very strange way, it's the beginning of true energy scientific medicine. It's really where energy enters into the picture in medicine. But that was my career. And so I was a professor of medicine at the university and all that kind of stuff. But meanwhile, living all of these experiences at the same time. And I kept thinking, perhaps I'm supposed to focus more on the other side. Like maybe I shouldn't really continue medicine. And I kept hearing, no, it's important you stay. It's important you stay. It's important you stay. So I thought, okay, I'll just keep trudging on. And so what I realized later is the way things are made in a spiritual sense is there's energetic templates that are laid before form takes shape. And so there need to be people in all kinds of facets of our world, in political systems, legal systems, teaching systems, health systems, medical systems, you name it. And they're holding an energy of the future. They're holding almost a matrix of light that's part of their system. And they're holding it in these places because it's creating the gridding, if you will, or the energetic underlay for what the future will bring. And it's invisible. Like you're not doing anything. You're not, creating anything specific. It's holding an energy in place for certain things to be able to start to solidify or begin to organize. And so I think in retrospect, that's kind of how I see my engagement there, because it's very 3D in one way. Like the work is very acceptable and normal and 3D in many ways, but also futuristic in another way. It is an evolutionary part of medicine. And on the other side, I began teaching, and I began teaching people about healing, and I began doing all these kinds of things. But the worlds eventually collide, right?
Eventually.
And so what I found interesting working with people was there was so many sources of information. They were random. It was hard to recommend things to people to learn about healing. And there were also a lot of things that I didn't think were quite true or a little bit off the mark.
But I just got to ask a question.
Yeah.
Were you actually doing hands-on healing?
Yeah.
So you had your medical job and then you were doing hands-on healing.
Correct. Yeah.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Did you ever, apply the hands-on to the medical world?
What I would do often is when I'm reading scans, every once in a while, I would get this impulse to pause with the scan. And I would pause with the scan and hold the person to whom the scan belonged in light.
Oh, beautiful.
And so that I would, because I was working with technology, right? Like I do a lot of procedural things. I still do a little bit where like biopsies and things using guidance for precision and what have you. And so, but my exposure to the actual people is limited mostly to those procedural things. A lot of it is just, it takes place through the interface of technology. But I would get those prompts. And so sometimes I would do that in the context of my work, but not directly hands-on, like, would not be something that I would be able to do in that format. But as I started to write and publish information and things later, a lot of patients at the hospital they'd bring my book to their oncologist and they'll say, he's here at this hospital.
Did your hospital know you were doing this?
I think, yeah, of course they did. But I was kind of quiet about it. I didn't make a big fanfare about it. I didn't ruffle too many waves. And they were very gracious too. Like people knew, but they kind of thought, well, he's not crazy. And, I really like him. So
He seems to be walking.
Yeah. So it was allowed for some reason.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And it never created any big drama at all. I'm like,
amazing.
I'm about to retire from my medical work in December, like this year. And through all that time, it's never, ever once been an issue. Now, some of the physicians would come to me and they say, did you write a book? And they'd start probing and asking questions, but not in a mean-spirited way. It was kind of like, oh, John, like, are you really into all that stuff? And I'd say, not all of it, but a good deal of it. I said, there's a lot of wisdom, I said, outside the confines of our understanding of science and medicine that we'll all wake up to one day. But for now, it's just starting. So just be patient.
You must have had so much respect built up that you must have opened their minds a little bit, because they couldn't probably reconcile that with just any old person. There must have been a nice foundation of respect.
And that's what I think was so beautiful about it, because of my role, I would be doing rounds a lot where, case reviews for discussion, the management of patients, where all the different specialties come together to have discussions. So everybody kind of gets to know everybody. Like it's a community, right? And so, it's not like an anonymous person or a stranger you don't know. And, I would feel bad for them sometimes because I'm thinking they have to reconcile. They have to process it too. And so, but there was always a magic and a rhyme and a reason to all things. And the other thing is I was in charge of postgraduate fellowship training for the physicians who had like finished their specialty and were now doing niche specialties, what are called fellowships. And so I was in charge of the program for like 12 years. And so I would be always dealing with these young physicians coming in to take positions for this kind of training in the institution. And so it was hard for them not to learn about what I was doing, because when they'd start to, they're coming for interviews and stuff. So they're, of course, on the internet looking, for Dr. John Ryan at the Ottawa Hospital or whatever. But they would, of course, find my webpage that's all about spiritual healing and Syrians and channeling messages.
What they must have thought, oh my goodness.
So it was a really interesting experience, but they would come, and it's really beautiful because they would have this awareness that it was kind of cool, but at the same time, not quite fully discussable. So I'd go into the interviews and they'd say, I saw your website.
That's safe. That's safe.
And I say, oh, I said, did you enjoy it? And they'd say, oh, very much. And many of them would like subscribe to meditations and things like that. So they were really quite open-minded about the whole thing. And so it was, but I thought that's a beautiful thing because it gave me the opportunity to work with many young physicians who will be practicing well into the future and, leaving some kind of impression perhaps on them.
Did any of them express an interest in moving over to the other side of the aisle?
Not really, because they're so well established in what they're doing.
And invested.
And it's strange because the one thing I always found interesting, Hope, because I got to walk so deeply, I guess, in both worlds, I never quite got the conflict that people talk about, between traditional medicine and holistic medicine and these kinds of things. And I would think to myself, it's manufactured because like medicine is just doing what it's meant to do. It's a medicine that is energetically attuned to the world we're leaving behind. Like it was perfect in its day in a strange way. And a lot of incredibly beautiful things came through medicine, like many gifts of healing and the ability for longevity and treating infections and surgery. Like the surgeries that are done today are mind blowing. And so there's an incredible evolution of knowledge and gifts. And I would always tease physicians. I would say it's all a gift of God. And so that, if you talk about science, like it's science that's discovering. And I say, all of this is already known. I said, we're just uncovering it. And so, you get to say little things like that plant seeds of thought but so much of what medicine has brought is spiritual inspired thought. It was like people who were open to receiving guidance and intuition, and they managed to manifest things through science and bring really beautiful gifts into the world. And so the holistic side of things it's this movement towards a more natural way of living and towards wellness versus treatment of disease and things. But I often say to people, I think of it like this, like if I was in a car accident and I had a broken leg, calm down on the Reiki. I'm going to get my bone casted and maybe even a plate put in. And if I'm bleeding, I want them to do surgery to stop the hurts. And then we'll talk Reiki. But, there's a time and a place for each component of all of these things. And so, I think we have to maintain that wisdom around things. Like people sometimes lose sight of that, or that's been my experience anyway, but can come around if you can just kind of explain how it's not quite as at odds as we think it is. And science has a burden of proof, like it has to, because of its nature, that's how it has to function. And, when we do esoteric healing, where sometimes the healing is months later or years later, or compounded by emotional factors of healing, energy overlay of past lives. I mean, you can't bring that into the medical paradigm. So that too has its place, and it helps people heal in really deep and profound ways that medicine can't touch.
Right.
But everything is about the wellness of a person in the end. It all comes together, at that point, and we'll begin to understand that, I think.
I'm curious, it's because you were reading these scans for so many years now. Did you ever develop the ability to read people, to look into their bodies in like a medical medium?
I've never studied mediumship or medical diagnosis in that way, but yes. And in fact, it almost precedes it. Like I remember when I was working I was a family doctor for a number of years before I went back just to do my specialty in diagnostic imaging. And sometimes I would get a smell. And it wasn't that the person had a smell. It wasn't like they were stinky or anything. It was, I would get like an olfactory sense, and I would know whatever they're talking about is serious. And so I would know to really keep investigating. Like if I couldn't come up with the answer or figure it out, I knew there was something that I was missing. And so I'd have that kind of awareness in practice. And sometimes I would see energy fields around people and things like that. And so, but I never explored, psychic diagnosis and all this kind of stuff per se. And as I started to work more in energy healing, I kind of moved into the camp where you realize that you have to view life a little differently when you're working in energy healing, because there are symptomatic things that bring people to look for help or healing or understanding. But when you're working in that space, you have to approach the person as a perfect being. It's almost like you have to see them in their soul's light.
Yeah.
And so you kind of move out of this space of wanting to label and tag and diagnose things. You really want to work from a different, like a layer of consciousness, for lack of a better word. Yeah.
You know, that reminds me of the video that went viral of I think it was in Korea, where the technicians are around a woman who's having an ultrasound at that moment, and it's a tumor in the bladder.
Yeah.
And they chant and over and over. What they're saying is basically they're seeing her as perfect.
Yeah, that's
It's
true.
true. Scientists too. Oh, there is no error. We see you as perfect. And my great grandmother was a practitioner, Christian Science practitioner, and healed lots of people.
Yeah.
It's that I'm not seeing your fault. I'm seeing your perfection, and inviting the body to return to that.
Yeah.
Right.
And you begin to understand that everything, because everything has an energetic foundation, everything that exists has an energetic foundation, whether it's every experience, every psychological attribute, everything. Like there's no exception to that rule. And so we have been through so much as a humanity and as an individual soul. And so much of what we carry in terms of challenges or conditions or illnesses or these kinds of things have layered patterns of energy. Like some of it comes from inherited patterns of energy, like the sins of a father through seven generations, these kinds of things. But also in our own spiritual journey, we've lived many different kinds of experiences through a stream of incarnations. And so it all influences us in positive ways and challenging ways, right? And so, because of what's happening at this point in time, people are beginning to return to that perfection. It's like the blueprint that knows how to bring that kind of healing back into the body is being restored.
Let's talk about that because and I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I want to pin on this because with so many people coming to you, probably coming to me, with the what's wrong with the world kind of message and whatever needing to be cured in a way from that. I think it would be so helpful to talk about what now is asking of us.
Okay. It's a great question. This is a peculiarly challenging time. And it's a challenging time because humanity is going through a reconstitution of consciousness. And so it's like we're moving from one frame of reality, we could call it 3D for, elementary understanding, and we're moving into a more multidimensional, higher dimensional, ascended, 5D. People label it all kinds of ways, but we're moving into this new world of energy and consciousness that will become a new foundation. So we're wavering between these two spaces. And so as we leave one and go into the other, it's a transitional experience. And that transition has all kinds of things that are part of it. It's like you're in this time that's unsettled, things are falling apart, new things haven't quite formed. Nobody really has their bearings. You're trying to navigate and everything seems foggy and you can't see clearly and all this kind of stuff, right? And so we're going from a kind of reality into another kind of reality. And it's happening over a period of time. It's not, as humans, we think we have a thought and we should be able to experience it the next minute. But this kind of transition is a generational transition. It's going to take, in fact, a multi-generational transition. It's going to take quite a number of years to really implement itself. And the very foundation of what it is to be human is changing as we do this. Like we're moving into a world that's kind of post-duality, where we're post hyperpolarization,
Mhm.
post the fragmentation of that kind of division, post all of those things. But as we go into the period that we're in, all of those things become amplified and magnified and extremized in all kinds of different ways. And so when we live in the 3D world, of course, we're dealing with the consequences of all those activities and all that craziness and the dishonesty and the polarization and all the things that go along with that. But I always go back to the words of Jesus. There was a saying when he was teaching the disciples, and he said, you have to learn to live in the world, but not be of the world. And it's really a profound, profound teaching if you just pause with it for a minute, because what he's teaching us in that one phrase is the navigation compass we need for this time. So the world is full of all of its craziness. There's good, there's evil, there's dark, there's light, there's up, there's down, there's dishonesty, there's graciousness, there's everything is all souped together in the 3D construct. And if you're in the world and you're trying to understand the world from that level of reality, you don't have the information you need to see the fuller picture. So, what he would teach the disciples is how to be present at a level of consciousness that was transcendent to that experience.
Right.
So, and he would teach them, like, yes, that person cursed me, but I'm asking you to forgive them. So, in the 3D world, we don't do that. We find vengeance and we find, retaliation and all the kinds of polarity that would go along with that. But he was saying that if you just take that opposition, you're just polarizing the moment. So instead, I'm asking you to see it from a different vantage point. It isn't that the person was kind or, there's no mistake or confusion about the nature of the experience, but I'm asking you to live it in a different way. And so I think that's what we have to remember in these days, Hope. It's like we have to be able to understand, yes, there's chaos and craziness and really, like they say, bad shit. There's lots of nasty, nasty things going on. You turn on the news, you turn on, all that kind of stuff, and you see all these crazy things happening and the wars and the deceit and the lies that propagate them and all that stuff. It's so transparent. Yet at the same time, you're thinking humans are really living through this and they're being tormented and tortured and all, abused in so many different ways. And yet there's this incredible pulse of light that's pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing gently and sometimes strongly. And then it is a wave and then it recedes a little bit, and a wave and it recedes a little bit. And so as we do that, you realize we're propelling this energy forward that's going to push through that paradigm. And so we're going to land in a place where all of that begins to disintegrate. It's like we get at a level of energy where that can't exist anymore. And so that's really what the ascension is. But I often say to people, the ascension is a bit of a misnomer. It's more of a descension, because really what you're learning to do is incarnate your spirit, not like fly off, go back
Right.
to spirit, but to bring it into form, like to bring it into your life, to bring it into your thoughts, to bring it into the way you make your decisions, to the way you treat yourself, to the way you treat other people, to the way you do everything in the end.
Yes. Yes.
So,
I don't know if you are familiar with the infinity wave, but that was the way it introduced itself was as this push of evolution, and these waves were going to be getting bigger and bigger and bigger, as it progressed. And that is specifically the infinity wave is here to help people get into that state of mind and maintain it through the chaos. And no matter what happens, and my daughter went to a Steiner school for a couple of years, and Steiner talked about this, the calm observer,
mhm.
and that's this embodiment, this what you just described as a way to live your consciousness more and more every single moment, no matter what. And that it is when we do that that the doors to perception open. It's not the other way around. It's not, oh, I want to be a psychic, or I want to be a this or that, and I need to study how to do that. No, it's It comes from the inside out. And the more that we can maintain that state, and by the way, that's another argument for maybe Yeshua went to India, because it's actually that be of the world but not in it is a Sikh saying.
It is. Yeah.
So I once again, I think he probably went over there, got that knowledge.
Well, wisdom is wise, right?
Absolutely. It's just so beautiful. And that sentence has guided me so much through the years. As I was learning, on my trajectory. Before we take the Q&A, because I do want to give people a chance to ask you questions, the piece that we haven't gotten to is or I'm sure there are many, but one thing we haven't gotten to is your channeling of galactic beings and how that happened, and tell us about that.
Well, it's kind of funny because as I started to do healing work, I began, one of the experiences I began having, Hope, was I would get these visionary dreamlike experiences, often in a meditation, sometimes in the dream state, but they would be teachings. Like there'd be like a package of information that would present in a pictogram kind of form or a visual kind of form. And a lot of it I wouldn't understand when I was first being shown what I was seeing, but eventually I began to put the pieces together. And what I to kind of condense that all into a 2-minute understanding, what I began to understand was, as humans, we have an energetic structure beyond just the chakras and the energy bodies and all these kinds of things. It's a cord of energy, which is really a helical field of energy that they call the 24th chromosome, the way that I received the information. And so they explained that this is like an energy field that is really, they gave me all these pictures to show me ways to think about it. But the most direct way was it's a line of energy that connects you to your monadic self, the self that you are when the creator first made you, beyond your experiences, beyond your higher self, beyond your incarnational experiences, all that kind of stuff. It's like this channel of energy that is really tethered to you in your human body, but also connects you to that aspect of your being. And the way we have been living in the duality experience of the planet, which was by design, a lot of that was tampered down. It had to be kind of like tampered. And so, there's all kinds of theories about that being malevolent and bad forces doing it and all that kind of stuff. It's not the way it was shown to me. It was a structural design as the earth rotated through a dark period or a dense period of energy that was designed to give the earth the duality opportunity so that it could be a school for them. And so as we go through this awakening, this little channel of energy is opening back up again. And so the helix is opening, or there's an expansion or recalibration of the 24th chromosome. And so I was given information to begin working in that space for healing and personal development and all that kind of stuff. And so I had kind of lived through all of that. I was comfortable talking about chakras and energy with pretty much anybody at this point. And then all of a sudden I was in a meditation in 2019, and this big ball of light arrived inside my head. It was in my third eye, but I could see it, and it was brilliant. And it began to open up like an array. And out of it came light beings, like they stepped out of this space and they stood there in an array, like a choir, just kind of in an arc. And they're all there glowing in this beautiful silvery blue white light. And they have a form that looks humanoid, but they're really energy beings. Like they didn't really have a face or eyes or facial structure. They're just energy beings. And they began communicating, and they explained to me that they are the Syrian blue-white collective. And they explained that they're coming at this time in a conscious way because they've been present through the evolution of all the learning, and what the work is called unity field healing. That's the nature of the work, or the name of the work. And so they've been present through the development of unity field healing and all of that, but they wanted to begin a series of monthly transmissions. And they said the only way we can really do this is by being more consciously clear about who we are and what we're doing. And so they said this is really for people who are experiencing the Ascension integration, and we are able to work with people in a really tailored way through these meditative transmissions to help them integrate the changes they're going through, integrate the energetic transformations that are necessary, all that kind of stuff. And so they said, we're really here for the group of people who are there in their journey. And they never speak in hierarchical sense, like it's better that you're doing it, other than people are not doing it, none of that stuff. It's just this, people are there and that's what they need. And we would like to be available to do that. And so I thought, this is too much.
Can't really reach too much.
You finally trapped me. I can go talk about all the other stuff now. I've found the comfort, but do I really have to start talking about this? Anyway, so I eventually, pretty quickly, I guess, kind of made peace with the whole concept and began the transmissions, and they've evolved. They continue to this day. It's 7 years now we've been doing them. And but that's the purpose of them. And they've been teaching us more lately about the integration of what they call in the work the diamond light body. And they're explaining that we're integrating a field of quantum crystalline light that will become part of the everyday human being. And it has to be designed and developed so that we can live in the new awakening crystalline grid on this new, electromagnetic grid that was set by Christ. And so as the crystalline grid is expanding and we're moving into this new energetic space, our energy bodies are changing. We still have what we were, but it's almost like layers or attributes are being added to it. And so they refer to it, and they said, don't get stuck on names. Don't worry about names. We'll give you a name, but don't be attached to the name. And so they called it the diamond light body. And so they explained that that's an integration that's taking place. And they said, it doesn't happen all at once. It happens over a period of time. And the analogy they showed me was the time of Elijah and Elisha, where, Elijah he received his Merkabah. He disintegrated, like he went off in this streaming ball of light, what they perceived as a chariot and all that kind of stuff in the narratives that were described. But they said that's what happens if your energy comes too quickly or, takes you up. But this is not a time for that. It's a time for the integration of that energy into the body. And so it's very clear. I mean, they always give me these analogies that are so profound because they're simple, but they demystify so much that would be confusing otherwise. And it's the other thing that was really interesting is they do channel messages. Like when we're doing the meditations, they'll often speak to us in that moment. But it's an interesting kind of a channeling because it's not like channeling lots of information or spiritual guidance. And they explained to me that the channeling isn't even that important. He said it's a process that takes place, but what's happening is the energetic process of the moment. And so they've explained that when we're in these meditative spaces and in these quantum spaces together, and we're all joined in consciousness and we're all working together in that way, the energy is established for really profound transformation. And the meditation is kind of a distraction. The channeling is kind of a distraction. It's really that energetic encounter that's the most important part. And at first, that didn't make a whole lot of sense to my little 3D head, but lived it over the years, I realized that it too is profound because it's the truth and it's really where the change is happening. So
no, I concur with you because the transmission, I just figure it's a transmission comes through. There are words and there's a bit of a journey, but it's more about the energy that is being transmitted, to allow everybody to take that into their field in whatever way.
100%. And in fact, the most powerful channelings that they give are not in English. They're in a light language.
Oh, right. You
And
do
so,
light language. That's
and
right.
so that, yeah, well, I don't do it. It's just, it kind of happens.
I gotcha. I used the wrong word. Yeah. Right. It just comes through that way.
Yeah, and it's very spontaneous. And I don't really, it's funny because in the transmissions, we always have a light language session. It's the only time it's a consistent. But there are other times when I'm doing things that it will come through, but it's not a and the day we were together for the event in August, that is exactly what happened. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the two of you.
I forgot about that.
Off to the races. I haven't had light language happen yet, so I'll be curious to see if that happens. All right. Well, John, this has been so wonderful. And I feel like everybody now has a sense of who you are and how you came to be who you are. And that's a treasure to have. So thank you for your wonderful sharing. Let me ask now, folks, don't be shy. Put your hand up. Lisa, hello, lady. Come on in.
Oh, hello. I'm so thrilled to have two of my favorites here on the screen together. Thank you, Hope, for hosting, bringing John in, and John, I'm so happy to wow, together at the same time, same place, sort of. I've done dozens of your meditations. I've been following your work, and it seems that I have so many people that I just love the energy of through Cryon. So that was you, and then the Stargate experience, and now hello. Oh, isn't that crazy?
Are-
No. Oh my goodness. Okay, the string theory physicist. Hello.
Oh, who I just spoke to?
Oh my goodness.
Uh,
I can't, it's I can't even believe that I'm forgetting.
It's okay. It's okay.
But I'm just curious about the meditations, and I really resonate with the Syrian Blue Wave Collective and the energy, and I've rarely made it through consciously through any of the meditations, but and now I know it's all the distractions, so it's the energy that I've received. So in particular, there were two. There were the matriarchal line and the patriarchal line meditations.
Yeah.
From I think maybe a couple years back or last year, and just wondering how. I mean, could you could you suggest how frequently, to do that, and how to feel if that has been cleared?
Right. So interestingly, when we do the transmissions, the way that they've explained them is they're like catalytic moments. And so the intent that's encapsulated in the transmission is seated in the energetic process. And so it's something that unfurls over time. It's already done. It's done. Like if you listen to the meditation kind of once, you've seeded the transformation. And everything after that is just a reinforcement of the process. So the true answer is you don't really have to do it or repeat it. By doing it, you have activated the core transformation of that moment. And those two transmissions were very profound and powerful for people because we're in a place where we are letting go of so much lineage energy. And what you begin to understand in the evolution of knowledge is that when we're here in this body, historically, we would be born, you'd live an experience, you'd neutralize some karma, you'd maybe take on other karma, you'd have experiences, and then you'd pack it all back and you go back into spirit and you have that little memory packet as part of your soul's memory. And in all of those experiences, there were traumatizing experiences of one type or another. Sometimes we were the perpetrator and sometimes we were the recipient. And so, but we have many experiences that were traumatizing in different ways. And that can be true in many, many lifetimes. But then you're also the child of two parents who've had the same story. And they're the child of two parents who've had the same story. And so on. And she told two friends and he told two friends and so on. And so when you really put together the mosaic of all the energetic bits and pieces of that, you can see how quickly it becomes a pretty big thing. And so what they've explained is that it's almost like you've taken out the pin that holds it in place, and it begins to unravel like a blanket. And so that takes time. And it's not that you have to keep doing things to make it happen. It's kind of like set into motion almost by the meditation itself. And so the antidote is to be patient with the process. Just understand it will unfold in its perfection, not to stress about it or worry about it in any way, and realize that it does take time and that's not wrong. It's just the nature of things.
Perfect. That's a beautiful explanation. And it's David Clements that I was thinking.
Oh, dude.
Oh, David.
So thank you so much, Dr. Ryan, John.
You bet, Lisa. It's a pleasure.
Thank you, Lisa. Anybody else have a wonderful question for John? Come on, y'all.
Don't be shy.
He's here. How often do you get to talk to him? Usually you watch, these YouTube videos and you don't get a chance to say it because it's pre-recorded. But we like to make it live so that you can ask. Helma, did you want to ask a question? Oh, okay.
I really appreciated the whole hour listening. It was just so wonderful to learn all about that, John, about all that. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome, Helma. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Helma. Well, I think before we, in case anybody, you still have some time, folks. So think of a question or a comment. But let's make sure that we have spoken where you can be found, John.
So for me, all of the work I do is housed on a website called unityfieldhealing.com. So people can go there. When you go to the site at the top, there's a navigation bar and there's information about Unity Field Healing, about practitioners in Unity Field Healing. One of the things that evolved in this work was, as I learned the technique, for lack of a better word, or the process, I began to do it with people, but then was led to teach people or initiate people to do the work. And so I started teaching practitioners to become practitioners in Unity Field Healing. And there's over 600 now around the world. So it's really, really
The open question.
and it grown. And so there's a listing of practitioners in the navigation bar. So people all over the world who are open to doing sessions with people, which can be done in person or distance. And then there's a tab specifically for the Syrians. They get their own tab. And so, and under that, there's a few lines of information, the transmissions, and the way they've structured it is every month there's a teaching. So it's like a 3-hour evening event. We get together, we do all kinds of things. We seed the crystalline grid with flowing patterns of energy. We do light language, all kinds of stuff. And then there's a meditation transmission at the last 30 to 40 minutes of the evening. And all of those meditations are recorded and made public. And so they are on the website in chronological order. So if you go to the Syrian tab under the transmission recordings, if you go to the page, it's like 60 or however many there are now of these meditations, and they're freely available to anybody who is drawn to any of the specific meditations. And really let your intuition guide you. Like if you read through them, there may be 3 or 4 of them that will, I promise you, 3 or 4 of them will just jump out. And those are the transmissions I encourage you to begin with, rather than to think you have to do them in sequence or all of them. Just let your intuition kind of guide where you connect with the energy. But they're all there. People can go and listen to them freely and don't have to register or anything. So it's
I
cool.
love that. Thank you for that, John. That's so generous. And I'm right on the same page with you in terms of sharing those kinds of things. It's wonderful.
Awesome.
Helma, did you want to ask a question?
No, my question actually was, can it be done long distance?
Oh, okay. Okay.
That's so you said, yeah.
I was picking up on your question, Holly.
That's it. So John, so people can can they have private sessions with you, or would they go to another
At this
practitioner?
point, a practitioner, just it's because it's a time thing, Hope. Like as I evolve the work, and in fact, this year I for the first time taught a group of teachers, and so there were 18 of the practitioners became teachers, and so they've started teaching their own classes now for practitioners as well. And so it's, but the work is very interesting because when I first started to develop it, I was told, and this wasn't a hard thing for me to hear because it's the way I tend to do everything. They said, just this has to be organic, John. Like, don't think you need to promote it or do any of that stuff. You have to make it available and let people find their way to the work. And what you'll see is that when people connect with the work, it's in their akash, in essence. It's like it's within them to have that connection. And so the beautiful thing that's happened, Hope, over the years is that all the people who've done the practitioner training have been led there by their heart. And so it's made this incredible. The events are incredible. Like the practitioner trainings are so beautiful, but it all happens from people connecting. Like they'll hear an interview or they'll hear something, or somebody has a session and a friend tells them about a session. There's a lineage of energy that's always connecting the process. And I just love that. And I think that's a beautiful way for things to grow. It's the way nature grows, right? So
Absolutely.
that's why they say make it organic. But despite that, in 7 years, it's grown into a pretty big practice. There's about 600, like I said, trained practitioners. So with all the other work and things that are part of that, then I had to pull back on doing the sessions. So I don't really do them anymore, but there's lots of opportunity for people to have them for sure.
Fantastic. And to be trained themselves.
And to be trained themselves, absolutely.
This is a great opportunity for everybody. If your heart calls to bring you over to Unity Field Healing, there you go. We've just opened the door for you. And I want to mention something based on something that you said earlier when we were talking about the times we're in and the choice point. And was there enough love? And I couldn't agree more. And I wanted to share with you, you know, I grew up with a mother who was very environmentally aware at a very young age. I mean, she was really always in the forefront. And so we were marching to save the rivers and doing all that stuff and worried about overpopulation, when I was still in high school. And so that stayed with me for a long, long time. And then I started to kind of, I don't know, I wasn't sure what to think about it. And I'm looking at the earth and I'm talking to Gaia. And, she says, I've got it under control. Don't worry. I'm good. Just love me. Just appreciate me because I love you and appreciate you. And that's for everybody, not just me. And so, I kind of backed off having any opinion. And then I think it was last year, I was doing a channeling and all of a sudden what came through was that the reason that we have more love now is because we have so many people. When we've been at this choice point in the past, the world was not as populated. We've built up enough so it turned the population from a negative to a positive. And I was like, oh, now I see the genius of this, Holy cow. Oh my gosh. And so there is more love because people have love within them, whether they know it or not. It's in them. That's part of who they are just by the nature of being alive. And so it's kind of ironic, that the population turns out to be when it fits, that tilts the scales into, we have a different trajectory now.
It's funny too, because if you look back, you kind of realize, like, if you look what happened in time, like if you go back to say the 60s and then the 70s and so the 60s was the hippies, right? So it's like all this brand new consciousness, this more like a freedom of love expression, all kinds of things that were really antithetical to the 50s and what life was before that. And it brought a whole wave of love, and it had its challenges and all that kind of stuff, but it brought a different energy. And then the 70s were all about breaking things down. Like like rock and roll, like, and then even vibrationally, it was like shattering, right? So it was kind of like a shift of consciousness. You can kind of see how it was all like a preparation
But it
for,
was also the beginning of Est and Esalen, and I
exactly,
mean,
consciousness thinking.
it was kind of two things happening at the same time.
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And then since that point in time, we've been kind of like living through all of that transformation. But the 87 to 2012 period is kind of strange in lots of ways, because it was a period of time where the old was still very the reality, and the new had not quite begun, not in the way it would start in 2012, 2013, 2014. And so it was this in between space, but there were lots of people who were awakening. And to be honest, many people were frustrated during that time, because you're awakening, your consciousness is developing, you're learning things, but you're thinking, this isn't going fast enough. Like,
Right.
I'd like to see it in my lifetime, kind of thing, that kind of stuff. And not understanding the fullness of the picture, like how big of a transformation this really is. And I'll always say, to the cosmos, a generation is a twinkle of an eye. Like,
Right.
it's not a big thing. And so we're in full, maelstrom now of all that change. But we're at a very special time right now. We're catapulting, like, through this little sequence of months, we're catapulting into some very special energetic changes and evolution. So
Exactly. Exactly. We do have somebody, Ja. Is it Ja? Would you like to unmute yourself?
Yes, hi, JD here. Hi.
hi
Um,
there.
John, yeah, I really love your sacred oil blend, especially the ancestor and the quantum blend.
Okay.
Yeah, and with Richard Rudd from Jinky is talking about sacred union in 2027. Is there anything on the pipeline for a blend on sacred union?
So for those who don't know about this, I'll just take a minute to kind of introduce. One of the things that I've been prompted to do in recent times is, it's strange. I realize I have this ability, I guess, for lack of a better word, to, when I smell things or sense things, I often see geometry. Like, there's a geometrical configuration. It makes sense when you think about all the things we're talking about and stuff. It's kind of like a connection with that level of reality. Like, obviously in my soul and my being, there's a connection there. But when I sense things, there's often a geometrical pattern to it. And so I started to create blends of oils, and the oils were kind of intuitively led. Like, I would have to follow kind of a process of guidance and create these blends. And then the blend would, develop, and then I would smell it, and it would evoke a certain kind of, not a feeling, it was a presence. And so there was a series of 5 of these oils created. They're called the sacred oil blends. And so 3 of them are kind of attuned to the various sessions of unity field healing, the serenity, restoration, and there's one called ancestral light. And then there's 2 other blends called Ascension and quantum. I even forget the name of it. Quantum light, I think, something like that. And so there were 5 oils created as blends, but they're not really just oil blends. There's a real, kind of a geometrical specificity to them. And the strangest thing of all is, in the last 3 months, I have been led to make candles. And I kind of thought, after all I did is work on Facebook, making candles.
So goosebumps now.
And but the funny thing is, it's the blends again there. And the way the series often teach me is they'll kind of inspire these experiences that lead to a wisdom in retrospect. Like, I'll look back and realize what it was about. But in the candles, again, it's kind of the same process. It's like I had put together these fragrance blends that have a really kind of a specific frequency or energetic feeling that I perceive. And then in the candle, they're burning, and you're creating an aura. Like, it's actually, the geometry is infusing the space.
Wow.
And so there's been a series called the Sacred Elements in candles. And so they are earth, fire, air, water, and ether. And so they are also part. Now, for that stuff, I have a separate website mostly for that. So I can give you the name of that, Hope, if people are interested in reading all about that. It's
Oh, yeah.
inneressentco.com. INNER.
Let me make sure that I'm going to put that in the chat and see if I get it right. Inner essence.
Inner. Here, I'll type it. in the
Okay. Fascinating. Oh,
Service to everybody.
and then I think we have one more question before we say goodnight.
Here, I don't think I can. I'll type it to you. I think you have to share it. So
Okay.
incandescentco.com. Oh, that's acting weird.
It's not just me.
There we go. There. So I sent it to you, and I think you can share it with others.
I haven't gotten it, but okay.
I'll spell it. INNERCENTCO.com.
co.com.
co.com. Yeah. So there's two co.co.
Okay. Innercandescentco.com.
Correct.
Got it. All right. It's out there for everybody.
The name is Candescent, means to glow with the warmth of spirit. And so the name of the company is the inner light.
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
So,
Let's answer one more question by
Yep.
Lisa.
It was just a technical, well, not technical, but John, are you in Toronto? Or
in Ottawa.
oh, you're in Ottawa. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever come to the West Coast?
I have many times over my years. I haven't been there lately.
Okay, so you're not planning on any
I
events or anything?
No, I don't have an event there in the next short time. No, I have no immediate plans to go, but I love the West Coast.
Okay, well, come and say hello.
I will. Where are you, Lisa?
I'm in Vancouver. We're
In
just
Vancouver.
outside of Vancouver. Yeah.
Nice. Okay. All right.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Thanks, Lisa.
Oh, Rebecca, quickly, because we're getting close to time. We're actually over time, but we don't care.
Thank you. I've been resisting, but John, your story about the whale, I don't even know what to say, but there was a whale in my experience as well.
Okay.
And when you said that you were told that it was there when you were born, I can't even talk. It just resonated so strongly with my experience. And then years later, I was rescued at sea by 5 dolphins.
Okay.
And I was taken into what I'll call my light body and so forth and so on. It lasted a day, and ultimately I was returned to the boat. Somehow they brought me back into the body, and I swam the last few yards of the boat.
All right.
The resonance is so strong, I'm having a hard time asking a question even. Okay, thank you for your patience, both of you. So I guess my question is, the Syrians have anything they would like to share with me just quickly in this moment?
It's interesting. I'm being shown a 5-pointed star, and it's surrounded by 2 rings of light. And it's like they're pressing that pattern towards you. And they're asking you to be at peace, really, is the translation I would give. But it's to rest in the knowing that you are really aligned with your purpose and with your presence, your reason for being here. Know that in your heart. Let it sing through you. Let it be the way you are in your day-to-day life, knowing everything you do is that energy and presence. But to be at peace is really the key message I hear behind everything. Yeah.
I can't begin to tell you how helpful that is. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank
God
you,
bless you.
Rebecca.
There's streaming rainbow light through that pattern that I was singing.
Nice.
It's good.
Rebecca, thank you so much for risking talking to us. Really appreciate it. Everybody learns from everybody else, so
Right.
really appreciate it. All right. Well, what an evening. Wow, John. Just fabulous. So great. And I think we need to have another chat down the road piece. And maybe, I don't know, we'll see what happens. But it's been an absolute pleasure. If you all like this, put your little thumbs up, like and subscribe, and share it. And we'll be back for more down the road. Lots and lots of love to you all. Thank you very much. Thank you, John. Thank you,
You're
everyone,
very
for
welcome.
coming.
Thank
This
you,
was
Hope.
fabulous.
Lots of love to everybody, too. Everybody here.
All right. Night-night.